Well, here with us now to talk more about that Georgia auto plant raid is immigration law expert and partner at law firm Rabana and Ricci, Elizabeth Ricci. Thank you so much for your time. So, Ali laid out kind of the logistics of that raid. And there's now this deal on the table to send those Korean nationals back, with South Korean leaders saying they were not notified beforehand of this raid. Should that have happened? Is that normal protocol before this type of large-scale raid?
Thank you for having me. There hasn't been this kind of raid ever. This is, as you previously mentioned, the largest single site raid ever. So it doesn't really have any precedent. And it would not be normal to notify the country that they were doing this raid for several reasons. It would compromise, especially the law enforcement effort to conduct the raid. But it is particularly unique to me because just 11 days ago, President Trump and the president of South Korea had a meeting at which South Korean firms pledged $150 billion to invest in U.S. projects. So it's a bit ironic, but I don't think it would have been appropriate to notify them in advance.
All right. So, Elizabeth, there were apparently issues with their visas, but court records are indicating prosecutors don't know who hired these, quote, hundreds of illegal aliens. Does that need to be looked at closer versus just stopping at the fact that these workers were apparently here, illegally or with visas that had problems?
Well, presents a great question, right? Because you can be undocumented, meaning you entered the U.S. without permission. It could also mean that you entered with permission and still have permission to be here, but can't work, or that you entered with the permission that allowed work and that permission expired. So it's very curious that they don't know who hired them. Georgia is an e-verify state, meaning that employers, especially those of the size of Hyundai and LG, are required to verify their workers' identities and eligibility to work in that e-verify system. So I find it hard to believe that they don't know who hired them. We do know that they were working to the tune of 475 of them. About 47 of those were detained. 46 of the 47 were Korean. So it's curious and a bit suspicious that they don't know apparently who hired them. But nonetheless, what we're not hearing about is 475 American companies or even 47 American companies being fined or sanctioned for hiring unlawful aliens, because you can't have somebody working illegally without someone giving them work. So there's a bigger issue here, and we're only seeing this one-sided enforcement of the workers and not the companies hiring them being punished.
Yeah, you raise such a good point there. And speaking of the companies, and you mentioned this as well, South Korea, has pledged billions of dollars in investments here in the U.S. What message does a raid like this potentially send to other international companies operating within the U.S. and maybe not even international companies? Because as you said, this applies to American companies as well.
Well, I think it's going to have some short and long-term diplomatic issues, but it will give companies pause to invest in the United States. But it just goes to show that this is a complicated system, and we need workers in this country who are filling positions that we cannot fill with domestically educated workers. Immigrants can fill that need, but we need a legal mechanism for them to do that. Many of these workers were on the visa waiver program, also known as ESTA. And it's not that they're making a deal to return them. That's part of the nature of the ESTA program, that if you are arrested, you are not allowed to see a judge or go before an immigration officer for deportation hearing. You're just removed. So they're just going to go ahead and remove those South Koreans who are here on the visa waiver program. But we need programs that allow people from other countries and other companies that have subsidiaries or affiliates with American companies to come in and do trainings, inspect facilities, and that type of thing. But the system that we have is currently broken, and this really goes to show that we need to comprehensively improve our system to allow for workers for these specialized positions that we just can't fill domestically.
So speaking of that, Elizabeth, President Trump posting on social media to foreign companies to, invest your business here, but follow our nation's immigration policies and train our workers. Do you think that's a realistic ask?
I think that could be realistic in the long term, but in the short term, you can't just say to do that. We have to have those trainings in place and programs in place, and to want to have those kinds of investments, $150 billion. You can't overnight say train our workers. You have to have people with experience and institutional knowledge from those companies from abroad, training people in the United States and setting up those programs. It's not something that can be done overnight. It's much easier said than done.
All right, immigration law expert Elizabeth Ricci, thank you so much for your time.